And
yes, and then if you finish early, that's okay too. But with that said, I'll let you take it away.
okay, thank you. So I wanted to say welcome to everybody. And yes, I'm going to be speaking to how my TEDx talk is shattering current thinking and saving lives. I know that might sound a little bit hyperbolic or dramatic, but I'll speak to that at the end. First of all, I am Holly Kenley, and I work in the field of psychology as a licensed marriage and family therapist, and I'm also an author and a speaker. And what lights me up every day is to help individuals bravely address the discomfort, the dis-ease, and the dissatisfaction in their lives so that they can create healing shifts, first within themselves and then in their relationships. And so last September, on the 24th in 2022, I did have the opportunity to deliver my first TEDx talk, and it was called Betrayal, the Loss No One is Talking About. So I want to just give you a bit of background information on betrayal and why I'm so fascinated by it and frustrated by this topic. So in the late 90s, I work in the areas of abuse and trauma. So of course, the word betrayal came into the room all of the time. And I was just so frustrated because when clients said, Holly, I feel so betrayed. At that time, we were using grief strategies to address betrayal trauma. Betrayal was looked at as a loss of trust issue. And so it was rebuilding trust and using those grief strategies. But I knew there was something that I was missing and that we were missing. And then when the economy shifted downward in the mid 2000s, all kinds of betrayal were coming into the room, kind of like today, as a matter of fact. There was financial betrayal, professional betrayal, and of course, relational betrayal. Again, I was fascinated and frustrated because I wasn't seeing relief or recovery with my clients. So I set out on a mission to explore betrayal. And I did that for 3 years. And I asked myself, what is betrayal? And a lot of other questions, but that was the main one. And if I could figure out what it is, then I would design a program for recovery from it, tailored specifically for recovery from any kind of betrayal. Because usually we think of betrayal, we think of it as infidelity, and there's just so many other kinds of betrayal. So what we're going to do today is touch upon a few questions. And the first one is, what is betrayal and what isn't it? Well, in my opinion, based on my research and working with clients, is that grief is the loss of someone or something else. Betrayal is the loss of self. And I'll get more into that in just a little bit. But loss of self is a very interpersonal type of loss, but it's things like identity and role and reputation, things that define who we are. And so the tricky thing about the loss of self is that it is usually, because of the betrayal trauma, buried beneath layers and layers of shame. So it's hard to access. So what I wanted to do when I was asking myself, what is betrayal, and exploring, is that I came up with 4 definitions. Because as a therapist, I want to be able to name clients' pain. And also I want to be able to, as I'm hearing them and what their betrayal trauma is about, I want to be able to connect with them and join with them. So after this 3 years of research, I came up with 4 definitions. Well, actually the first 3, and I'm going to go through them quickly with you. As I'm going through them, see if you can connect with any one of these 3 definitions if you've ever been betrayed or felt like you were betrayed. The first one is an investment into someone or something met with rejection or abandonment. Now listen carefully, because I said it could be someone, which we usually tend to think of, like a partner, a spouse, a sibling, a friendship, an employer, anybody who we have a relationship with, we can be betrayed by them. but it also can be something. And I'll never forget an example is before my career as a licensed marriage and family therapist, I was a middle school and then a high school teacher. And for a number of years, I was teaching at an international baccalaureate high school in the area where I live. And so I worked with juniors and seniors in this program. And one year, there was this extraordinary student. And I remember her saying to me at the beginning of her junior year, Mrs. Kenley, I'm going to Harvard. That's my dream. I've worked on it for 11 years. I'm going to do everything, and I have done everything I need to do to get to Harvard. So her senior year comes, she's more than a 4.0, perfect SAT scores, and every community service, you name it, she's done it. She gets an early interview from the team at Harvard that flew out to UCLA near the area where we lived. She interviewed and she wasn't accepted. And I remember to this day her telling me, Mrs. Kenley, I feel so betrayed, because she had invested 12 years of her life into this goal, into this dream, and she felt the rejection. And so once again, this is an investment into someone or something met with rejection or abandonment. The second definition is a profound trust that is profoundly violated. And this is the definition we usually associate with betrayal. I put the word profound in front of it because I feel like we can have a lower level of trust and not feel betrayed. We feel like we're going to have a good time here at the conference and we're not going to feel betrayed if that doesn't quite measure up. But when we have a profound trust that is profoundly violated, then yes, we do feel betrayed. What's interesting about trust, as I explored it and examined it, I discovered that there's two kinds of trust, and they're both important. The first kind of a trust is an innate trust. I say it's a natural bond, like this current that just flows naturally, innately between two individuals where there's typically a power differential, like parent, child, grandfather, granddaughter, teacher, student, doctor, patient, therapist, client, coach, athlete, employer, employee. So with this, we just naturally trust this because of that innate dynamic. It can lead to really painful betrayal. And then there's the kind of trust, I call it, and it's an extension of us. We hear about someone or something, we know a little bit, we kind of have a little bit of trust, but we don't know them well enough to have a profound trust in it. But over time, as we gather more information, we build that trust, but we choose to put our trust into this person or thing. And when that is violated, there's tremendous self-blame, shame, guilt, because we've chosen this relationship. I know that's sort of heavy, but I'm going to give you a lighter example of something where this happened and I felt profoundly violated by this experience, even though it's a lighter example. Is a few years ago, my husband and I started getting all those calls to go participate and be the audience in a timeshare kind of thing. You know, they get these tickets and these prizes. Well, we'd been to many of those over the years and we knew what to do and, just take the goodies and then be on our way. Well, we went to this one, and so we were prepared, and there were some pretty good prizes being offered up. Well, it sounded too good to be true, and we fell for it. Before we left that night, we wrote a pretty significant check, and it turned out to be a scam. What's interesting about this kind of trust, and we trusted in this person who sold us this package deal, is that there is that shame, there is that embarrassment. You don't want to talk about it. Why? Because we do the would have, could have, should have. We should have known better. So there's a lot of shame around it. We don't really want to admit to it or talk about it. On a heavier note, as I said, this usually falls over into some type of criminal activity, illegal, unethical, unjust kind of betrayals. A profound trust that is profoundly violated. The third definition or explanation, and by the way, there is crossover in these, there's overlap, is that, and again, I want to be able to reach a lot of people. I want to be able to connect. So I want to make sure I'm covering all the bases. The third explanation is a belief that is shattered or a truth that becomes a lie. These are the kinds of issues that tether us to who we are, to our identity, to our culture, to our belief system, to the things that really make us who we are. And again, we're tethered to them in our values and our beliefs. I see this happen a lot in my practice. And in this kind of violation, you hold a truth about someone. I have clients who find out through DNA evidence or that secrets are exposed that a parent isn't their biological parent, that there's another family that a parent has that has been kept a secret. It can be someone that you've honored and respected, and information surfaces, and that belief that you held them in such high regard, high respect, just is shattered. Again, this is a very painful kind of betrayal, and one that really speaks to our loss of self. So those were the first three definitions or explanations that I came up with in 2008. Then in 2015, I conducted an independent, formal, qualitative study. I studied daughters who were betrayed by their by their mothers. It was a 2-year study where I conducted these interviews. What was interesting about this is that I had given them those definitions for betrayal as they prepared for the interviews. And they could also give me their own explanation or definition of betrayal, because betrayal is a hard word to attach to someone who is very close to us, in particular, our mothers. So from this study, there was another definition that kind of found me. And so let me give you this definition and see if you can connect with it. It is someone who is important to us, who is unable, unwilling, or incapable of showing up in the role that they have been given and to carry out the responsibilities within that role. Let me say that again. Someone in our lives, it could be a parent, it could be a child, it could be an employer, anyone that is important to us that has been given this role, but they are unwilling, unable, or incapable of showing up in that role and carrying out the responsibilities within that role. A couple of important points about this definition. Those words do not excuse the betrayer. They explain what's going on. And in that research, these mothers who are unwilling, unable, or incapable of showing up for their daughters, most of them suffered from clinical disorders such as bipolar, major depression, generalized anxiety, and a host of other mood disorders. Also addictions with substances, drugs, and alcohol, or other addictive behaviors. Many of them also suffered with personality disorders, both clinical and then personality disorders. We call that comorbidity. And they had kind of in the categories of narcissistic personality disorder, borderline, antisocial, and also histrionic. Many of the mothers had physiological problems as well. So again, this helped to explain why they were not able to show up for their daughters in the ways that the daughters needed and deserved. And here is the point, that when the needs of a caregiver supersede the needs of those who depend upon them, that they feel betrayed. So that's another way that I connect with individuals as we're exploring what betrayal is and it isn't. So much difference between grief and betrayal. Our second takeaway that we're going to look at today is what happens to us when we're betrayed. And there's so much to say on this. And in my TED Talk, I do address this just briefly as well. So I'm going to take you through it just very quickly. When we go through grief, and this is one of the big differences between grief and betrayal, we navigate through the stages of grief, which are something like denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. Okay, there sometimes are more stages in that depending on the thinking around that. But when we're betrayed, what I discovered is that we go through 3 states of being. And I call them states of being because this is who we are for a period of time. But where it's not a permanent placement, we're going to move into, through, and beyond them. The 3 states of being are the states of confusion, the state of worthlessness, and the state of powerlessness. When we're going through a betrayal or unearthing a past one, we typically navigate through them in that order, but depending on the betrayal, if it's chronic, if it's ongoing, if it's episodic, or if there's multiple betrayals, we might be going through all 3 of these at the same time. So let's talk about the state of confusion. See if you can resonate with any of these feelings or questions. I'll know a client is experiencing betrayal because they come into the room and they say, Holly, why? Why did this happen? How could this happen to me? Can you help me understand? How do I make sense of this? And in the state of confusion, we have a loss of self, and that we have a loss of truth. We have a loss of reason, a loss of logic, a loss of common sense that we have tethered ourselves to. And there's a lot of symptoms that go along with that, but depression, anxiety, and all kinds of symptoms, tiredness, fatigue, insomnia, hypersomnia, because we're just in this sort of almost like manic-y state, trying to make sense out of something that does not make sense. Then we have, secondly, the state of confusion. I think this second state is actually the most painful of the 3, because this is a loss, state of worthlessness, is a loss of worth. It's a loss of value, who we are. It's a loss of our role, our identity, our reputation, our purpose, our belonging, our meaning. And I will have clients ask me these questions. Holly, who am I? I thought that I mattered. I thought that I was worth more than this. I don't understand how some other person, place, thing, opportunity, need, or desire can be more important than me. What do I do now? State of worthlessness. And then we move into the state of powerlessness, just sort of a frightening state of being, because we have lost control of everything and we can't change it. And yet simultaneously, we're being controlled and changed by our betrayal experience. And I will often hear clients say things like this: Holly, it's not fair, it's not right. My life has been completely destroyed and turned upside down, and they just move on like nothing happened. Or, my life is shattered. How can I begin to rebuild it? I don't feel like I have a voice anymore. I don't feel like I have the power to do it. The 3 states of being: state of confusion, state of worthlessness, state of powerlessness. Our next takeaway: how do we heal? Well, in my time left, I can't tell you everything, but I will tell you a few sort of healing tips to begin on this journey. One of the insidious things about the nature of betrayal is that it pulls us outward. We want to go try to make sense. We want to go try to resecure our worth or get our worth back. We want to go take charge of something and make this right. So betrayal pulls us outward. And in that outward position, we're also desperately wanting someone else or something else to make it right and fix it for us. And as children, of course, that's okay. We want that. We deserve that. But as young adults and adults, we must make it right for ourselves. We must turn inward, and we have to right ourselves. Even if somebody could fix it for us, it couldn't do the work that we can do for ourselves. The second kind of trap that we sort of fall into, or the thing that we need to do, is that once we make that decision that we're going to right ourselves in the state of confusion, we have the opportunity to reinstate our truths. In the state of worthlessness, we have the opportunity to redefine who we are. And in the state of powerlessness, we have the opportunity to reclaim our voice, recover our power. When we're first betrayed, we're in a very unstable place. But once we do that healing, I do want to make clear that we want to step into our empowerment, and we want to use our voice and our power to create healthy change for ourselves and also for others. As I begin to close, before we have any questions, I'm going to touch upon the last part. And why is it that I would say that we would save lives? In my how my talk is saving lives. Well, I mentioned about traps a minute ago and the insidious nature of betrayal. And so if we're going to wait for someone to make it right for us, we're going to be stuck in that place. I've had clients come in that are still telling their betrayal narratives 5, 10, 15, 20 years later. They are still stuck in that trap. And so in order to right ourselves, we have to own that and take on that responsibility and get unstuck from that and save ourselves. The second piece to this that really gets them stuck, is that they've been told 3 things over the years. And I'm not faulting anybody, but it's just kind of the myths around betrayal. They've been told to give it time. They've been told to just trust again and you'll be okay. Or thirdly, they've been told to forgive and move on. So let me just quickly address those for a moment. First of all, trust. You've already heard me say the work is that we need to trust ourselves first. We don't build trust with someone else. We first build it with ourselves, get a foundation. Then we learn how to trust others. Let's look at forgiveness. Is forgiveness important? Yes, it is. And people utilize that in a lot of different ways. In my work, in my experience, forgiveness may release the betrayer, and that's important to do, to let that go. But forgiveness does not heal the betrayal wound. It's doing what we talked about earlier, working through those 3 states of being. Time, as I say in my TEDx talk, time does not heal betrayal. I just gave you an example, but it's what we do with our time that makes healing possible. And I am going to look at the chat in just a second and see if there's any questions. I just wanted to close with this, speaking of time. This was one of the comments that has been left just, I don't know, yesterday or the day before. And when I talk about getting stuck in your betrayal narrative, Holly, whoa, you have opened my mind to recognize that my first feelings of betrayal go back to over 40 years ago and have never really healed, while having additional betrayals come along as well, additional betrayal situations. I have more understanding for myself and my thought processes because of your presentation. In the last few months, I have recognized on my own that this is well past time to nurture and give to myself, to find myself. I'm not sure I ever really knew myself. And that's what I'm talking about, is that as much as we want and we deserve for someone to come along and make it right, to fix it, it would not serve us well. And it would not